I had a hard time adjusting to Brazilian culture. I they're very they're not rude. They're very abrupt sometimes and like goofy in your face, like kind of do what they want kind of deal. But at the same time, they are so. It's to an American, if we look at it with our own eyes, they seem inconsiderate, but they are so caught up in how other people feel sometimes that they want to make that they're the most considerate sometimes. Um, I have I have had companions, Brazilian companions that like would go out of their way to make sure, maybe not that the house was clean or that the dishes were done or whatever, but like to make sure I felt like we were in a companionship. Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm having trouble articulating it. You always hear this about South American missions, but they are loving people and they will take care of you. And that's the thing I love most about the culture. And honestly, I miss the reckless fun loving of that culture. There's one time we were cleaning a house. We were in a house full of it was four companionship. No, it was three companionships, I think. Or two. Yeah, it was three companionships. And we were cleaning the house, and there you have to like throw water on the floor to clean the house. And my companion just takes a bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket of water, and dumps it on one of the other elders. And that then ensued a gigantic water fight, and everyone was soaked. It was just so reckless with our time and everything, but it was so fun. I think it's a good way to describe a lot of their cultures, like just reckless, fun-loving, and I loved that. It was so funny.
Yeah, I think I've said this like 20 times, so depending on how many videos you've already watched or how many times they've decided to actually just, put it in, but my favorite thing about Brazilians is how warm and receptive they are. I know that's cliche and whatnot, but compared to Americans, and I just recently went to Europe, people are kind of cold, human nature, but Brazilians are not. I don't know if it's because it's crazy hot there that they're just warm, but they are just so warm, receptive, and loving, and that was my favorite thing while I was there. And let's see, the food. I love you guys, all you Brazilians out there, but ever since I was, 9 months old, I would spit out beans, and I hate beans. But you guys know how to make them, and they're my favorite beans. But besides the beans, your food is great. So the food there is great, but you will eat rice and beans every single day without fail. If you don't have rice and beans, you will starve that day. But the culture down there is soccer. If you play soccer, great. If you don't play soccer and you're a redhead and you're better at other sports and not soccer, then it's a little harder, and just learn that people will make fun of you for your soccer skills. But it's okay. It's all in good fun because they like to joke, but no hard feelings. Although they will call you fat, they're very blunt people, which is cool, it's straightforward. You just can't take offense, which is weird if somebody calls you fat or whatever. I had these baggy shirts from Mr. Mac. Mr. Mac, I'm sorry, but you guys don't have the best shirts. Don't go to Mr. Mac. I wasn't a fan because they're just super baggy and they breathe well, but everybody will call you fat, and I wasn't fat. I was just this normal kid, but because my shirt was crazy baggy because of good old Mr. Mac, everybody was like, man, you're fat. And then when I got home and I went to mission reunions, everybody's like, you lost a lot of weight in like a couple weeks. I was like, no, it was the shirt. And you're always in your shirt and that Mr. Mac shirt. So I'm sorry, Mr. Mac. I don't mean to bash on you, but fix your shirts. So at least in 2008, they weren't good. So anyways, so yeah, they'll call you fat. Don't take offense. If you are fat, don't take offense. If you're not fat, don't take offense, I guess. And you're beautiful. You're not. Just kidding. Anyways, sorry, I just started rambling on, and I'm still rambling. So we'll probably cut it here.
So I love Brazil, probably a little bit too much, but one thing I really wanted as I went to Brazil is as I was in Brazil, I realized that their culture is just so awesome, and they have a lot of things that they do in their culture that we don't do here in the United States, and then vice versa. There are a lot of things we do that they don't do, and I feel like both had really, just really stable strengths, So one of my goals as I was in the mission was to take like kind of glean Brazilian culture and take all I could, like the really good points I like from Brazilian culture, and implement it into my own, and while at the same time kind of like getting rid of some American cultural aspects that I wasn't super fond of, I could say. I didn't see a lot of value in. Sounds terrible, but that's kind of how, that's kind of what I mean. I love America, don't get me wrong. But it's really cool. They have a lot of traditions. They just have a ton of traditions in Brazil. A lot surround food or dancing or music, But one thing that Brazil nails it, is they know how to make you feel like family in a sense. There's this thing that Brazilians do when they meet you, and they treat you like they've known you for the longest time. They treat you like a relative they haven't seen for a couple Christmases, And it's always this really sweet reunion, kind of a celebration. And that is something that I've always wanted, to bring with me, is whenever I meet people, I want them to feel like we might have known each other, I want it to feel natural, just like, kind of flow. So that's something I love about Brazil. They're also very, decorative people. So, like, and pretty much everything they do is they put presentation into it. I mean, Brazilian cakes, regardless of how they'll taste, will look super good. They'll look super fancy. I mean, the wardrobe when it comes to, like, parties and stuff, they make sure it's all out. Even parties for little kids, they'll throw parties for, like, a 1-year-old or like 6-month old, I guess. And it's just like the event of the neighborhood. It's kind of funny because this kid pretty much has no idea what's going on, but they're gonna have the whole like photo booth set up, everyone in the neighborhood invited, the fanciest cakes and like decorations, and it's they really go big or go home. They just go big. Another aspect of Brazilian culture that I love is they call it the jeitinho, which jeito means way. Means like almost like style, you can say. And jeitinho means like the little way. And it's this knack Brazilians have to always make something work out. They are the most resourceful people. If something's broken, they'll find a way to fix it. If they feel like they run into a dead end, they'll find a way around it. And that's something I really didn't realize that in America here. We're just like, okay, well, if it's broken, get another one, that kind of thing. Which is really common. But Brazilians will always find a way. And generally, that means you'll see some really weird things happening. Like people will be driving like a wagon with a motor down the street. You're like, things that are like, maybe you shouldn't find a way to do that. But you know what I mean? That's kind of the mindset there. And so they're really resourceful. They don't give up easily. That's like Brazilian culture.
Traditions and holidays down in Sao Paulo, or all of Brazil, revolves around soccer. It's everywhere. There's kids playing soccer in the street. There's soccer fields everywhere. Sundays, it's really hard to teach people because that's when all the soccer games are going. When you get to your mission, every member will ask you, I promise they'll ask you what team you like. So if you want members to really like you or to really hate you, pick a team right off the bat. I picked a team right off the bat, and it's, I served in poorer areas, and it's the poor area team. It's called Corinthians. And I'm like either super loved or super hated because of that choice. But, it's fun just kind of mess with members a little bit, give them a hard time. It's like, I heard my team beat your team the other day. And, that's Brazil. They're just crazy about soccer. Coming up, they got the World Cup down there. I can only imagine how crazy it's going to be. Good luck to the missionaries who are there during the World Cup. I hope you guys can actually teach some people, because when the Brazil national team plays, it literally is a holiday. Everything shuts down. Grocery stores, banks, everything. And, if a team wins that the people liked, it kind of sounds like a war zone with all like the fireworks and explosions going on, and everyone's like running, screaming, super happy. And I remember the first time it happened, I was pretty scared. I'm like, what is going on out here? It's like, soccer team just won. Don't worry about it. But just being around soccer for the 2 years and just around the people, I don't know. I just came to love soccer a lot. I'm super excited about it. I'm really excited about the World Cup, especially since it's going to be in Brazil. Just love how you can use one thing to get into almost any door. in Brazil, and that's soccer. If you can just like ease them into the gospel, it's perfect. Just apply it to the gospel somehow. But most people, they'll sit down and talk to you about soccer. As far as other like cultural things, Brazil's it's a pretty open country as far as like their customs, their culture. They're really willing to let you in at least once. Don't get discouraged if you get into a lot of houses, but they don't want to progress as you teach them, because it's kind of just a Brazilian thing. They don't want to hurt your feelings, and you just got to be careful to make sure they don't turn into investigators that you're just going there every day and they're not progressing at all. But they're super nice people. They're super friendly. They're more than willing to help the missionaries as far as the members go. Sure, you'll run into some members like everywhere that don't really want to help that much, but the large majority of the wards, they're always willing to help. The young men in the ward, they love going out with the missionaries. The missionaries like rock stars to the young men. They're all planning on serving missions. They want to be like the missionaries. A lot of people are converts down there, so they remember the missionaries that taught them, which kind of gets them more excited about missionary work. And they really just want to help the Lord. Like, some of the strongest testimonies I've ever heard were from recent converts down in Brazil, or less actives that were coming back. Other traditions. Holidays. Brazil has a lot of holidays that nobody knows why they have them. Like, the Catholic Church is like the biggest church down there, and it's got a lot of prominence in their society. So there'll be like St. John's Day, St. Paul's Day, St. Peter's Day. And anytime there's a holiday, everything closes. And it's really frustrating. You're like trying to go to the grocery store because you ran out of food or something, and it's closed, and you're like, no, what holiday is it today? Like, nobody knows what holiday it is. But the coolest holiday was Christmas down there. I loved Christmas in Brazil. The only negative is, since they're in the southern hemisphere, it's summer, and so it's super hot. But other than that, like, you get to call your family. In my mission, at least with my mission president, he let us stay out at night, like an hour longer. So we were able to be out in the street until 10:30, because the tradition in Brazil is on Christmas Eve, you stay up with your family until midnight. And when it hits midnight on Christmas Eve, that's when like the party starts. You have a huge dinner at midnight. That's when you like open your presents and everything. So instead of doing Christmas morning like we do here, it's midnight between Christmas Eve and Christmas morning. So yeah, it's a huge dinner. It was incredible. Like, I loved Christmas down there. Not a whole lot of Christmas decorations like you see here. You might see like the occasional like tree. The last year in my mission, I had an American companion, and we got pretty into it. We had like lights in our house, and we went all out. And then at midnight, when it hits midnight, there's just tons of fireworks. Like, imagine the 4th of July times like 5. That's probably like a Brazilian Christmas night. It's kind of tough when you're trying to go to bed, but whatever. Yeah, so Christmas down in Brazil, it's really cool.
I love the Brazilian people. When I was first called to Brazil, one of my basketball coaches and one of my kind of life mentors, he was also called to Brazil, and he told me, man, you're going to fit in Brazil. You're going to love the people because they love life, and they're fun, and they're funny. And I kind of said, oh yeah, I'm sure, whatever. I get there, I'm like, man, it's true. The Brazilian people, they love life. They love laughter, especially in Fortaleza. There's nothing like the people there. I've never been a part of a culture where it's just such a friendly culture, and once you get to know them, and they're just such a fun people. And one thing I loved about serving in Fortaleza, Brazil, was especially as a missionary, is that everyone has this belief in God, and they can have different beliefs about churches, but almost everyone believes in God. I think over my 2-year mission, I met 3 people in Brazil that said they didn't believe in God. And as you know, as a missionary, we talk to a lot of people. So to have 3 people and just, in the entire mission, distinctly remember, they say they're atheist. It really was 3 people. I can remember each one of those circumstances. I was like, whoa. I'd never had that experience. I was like, well, this is, Preach My Gospel talks about it, about how to teach someone when they don't believe in God, and it's usually for Asian countries. But it's kind of funny. I was like, well, I don't know how to do this. Usually we have kind of the same belief system. Obviously the message of the Restoration and how church as Christ was established and how it fell away with the Great Apostasy, and then how it was restored through the prophet Joseph Smith is different for them. But they believe that Christ is their Savior. They believe that there is one God and He's in charge of everything, that He is the creator of the universe. And so, they believe all this. There's lots of different churches within Christianity there, Catholic being a big one, but also there's the Assembly of God, or God's Assembly, not sure what it is here. And then there's the Universal Church, and there's lots. Baptist Church is very strong there. Jehovah's Witnesses there. There's lots of different churches, but everyone is super open about talking about their beliefs. Something that's a little bit different here is kind of, a lot of times we take our beliefs and they're kind of, inner. We're not going to talk about them. Brazilians love talking about what they believe in God and what Christ does for them, and they love learning more about it. And so it was really a great experience as a missionary to be in a culture that really believes that Christ is the Savior of the world and that God, is their Heavenly Father, and kind of just to help them add more to their beliefs, not to say, oh no, this is all wrong, but to say, yes, exactly right, and we want to teach you more about that. And so it's kind of an awesome experience that I loved about the Brazilian people, and also they're just fun to be around. They just laugh and they have a good time. So
in the Northeast, they do this thing where they sniff you. It's really weird. They they hugging you and they breathe in, sort of. It's so funny. And they do it to little kids, the top of their heads, sort of a thing. It's just a really affectionate thing to do, and it's odd, but they like to do that. So I guess if that happens to you, don't freak out.
Brazilians are very loving. I mean, there's exceptions to that, of course, but in general, they're very loving. So one of the hardest rules on the mission, or hardest customs to not participate in, is giving hugs and kisses to the opposite gender. And they'll just go for it because it's just normal if you meet somebody to just give them a kiss on the cheek or give them a hug. They're very touchy-feely in that way, very loving. And so that's something that you really have to be prepared for when you meet people on the street, is kind of, keep a stiff arm when you shake somebody's hand if you need to, if it's a member of the opposite gender. Brazilians are very blunt. They're very open. They're going to tell you how they feel. So don't be offended. If they're referring to somebody and they need to explain who that person is, they might call them the really fat girl or the really short guy or the bald guy, and it's just fine in their culture. So just don't be offended if they're overly frank. It's definitely okay to ask people for water, to use their bathroom, to come inside. A lot of times Brazilians are more willing to help other people rather than to receive your message that might help them. So if you ask somebody for directions, they're just going to be so nice. They're going to tell you, but then if you ask them if they want to hear your message, they might not be as willing. But they're definitely willing to help you with anything that you need. You can usually invite yourself inside, ask them if you can enter. It's going to be kind of weird for some people. Especially if they already have their own conception about the church. You would think if it was raining, then people would be eager to let you inside, but a lot of times it's quite the opposite because you're soaking wet, so they don't want you to come and completely drench their house, which is understandable. Usually in Brazil, you keep your shoes on when you go inside. If I ever took my shoes off, then they usually would pick up my shoes and bring them to me and put them right in front of me and tell me to put them on. So that's very normal to keep your shoes on. Maybe if your shoes are wet and it's a really nice house or something like that, you could take your shoes off. But generally, just keep them on. When you're eating, usually you shouldn't say you're full, or you can say you're satisfied. Eu estou satisfeita. And that's a bit more polite than to say I'm full. But Brazilians really want you to eat a lot. And when they make you food, then it means that they like you and like they love you, and it's what they're offering to you. So if you don't accept it, then it's kind of like not accepting their generosity. And even if they're very poor, they will give you all that they have. So if you don't accept that, then it's kind of a negative thing to them. So definitely accept their food. Just try it. Even if it's like scary, just try it. If it's something new, go for it. Experiment with new things.
Brazilians are extremely bold. They're often like Europeans in that respect, where they just say what they think, and there is often little to no filter. So what they're saying is their honest opinion. And this makes them extremely hospitable, one, and it also makes them extremely blunt sometimes. So they are extremely loving people, open-hearted and caring. They will just take you in, make you one of their own. They will offer you as much as they have as soon as you walk in. They often have fruit trees growing outside in their houses, and they'll say, well, take some. Just take as many as you need, as you want. Just go ahead. And so they're very open. And it's carried into lots of their physical gestures as well. I mean, we'll go up to people and we'll shake their hands, maybe give a hug or something. But in Brazil, you always hug everyone. Obviously, as missionaries, we only shook hands with girls and women, but the guys, we would always hug. And anytime a girl is involved, you always kiss each other on the cheek as well. You'll touch cheeks and just kiss the air after you've hugged or during the hug. And it's something a little different. Brazilians are much more touchy-feely than Americans, and it's something that I had to adjust to a ton. I often was very, no need to touch me. One of the jokes I found was, for example, in America, it's a foreign family in a movie theater because they'll sit right next to you. Americans will always leave at least one seat gap in a movie theater or any place like that, for example. However, Brazilians, they're all family. They'll come up, as they're talking, they'll tap you on the shoulder, on the elbow, they'll grab your arm, they'll kick you with their feet or whatever, and just do these little taps and stuff. They're signs of affection and just very much culture as well. It was something that I took a lot of getting used to, but eventually I just kind of assimilated it, and I got very much used to it. And I loved being able to go up to someone and give them a hug and just hold their arm and talk to them, look them in the eyes, tap them every once in a while, just because it was normal. They can also be very opinionated and very blunt. So if you come up and they are from a different church and they don't want anything to do with you, they will tell you. And they will yell at you and tell you to get out of their house. Sometimes they'll even try to be polite, and if you ask for a drink of water, they'll go get you it. But then sometimes they want you gone, and they'll make it very apparent. There was one time I was on an exchange with one of our assistants to the president, and we went up to this house, and he said, "I've got this." And so he asked for a drink of water. The lady came out with water, and we started to sip, and we just started to chat with her. It was a very calming conversation starter. We didn't carry water with us a lot of the time because we would just go from house to house, and we'd say, "Hey, can we get some water?" And everyone would always come out with water. And this one lady in particular brought us out the water, and as we started to chat with her, she snapped on us. And she just started yelling, "What are you doing? You came out here asking for water, and now you're trying to talk with me. I don't have time for this. I need to go do things inside. Give me your cups," and head off. And so we'd often find ourselves in these kind of not necessarily awkward situations, but just kind of rough spots where we're like, oh, okay, well, I guess you don't want to talk to us, and we go off. But yeah, so they're very, very open people.
The Brazilian people are incredibly friendly, incredibly loving, very outgoing, very talkative. They love to hug you. They love to touch you, grab your arm. So when you go to church, you're not like shaking hands. You hug everyone. Men will try to kiss you on the cheek. You have to tell them not to. So very loving, very warm, and that's something that I greatly admire about the Brazilian people is they just make you feel so loved and cared for. Something that I really love about them is they're very open. So you would go in to teach a lesson, and more often than not, they want to share their life story. They want you to meet their cousins and their aunts and uncles. So they're very family oriented. They often have meals with all their family. Their family lives close together. They all get together a lot, and they want you to meet all of them and talk to all of them, which was great. So we didn't have dinner like you do in the States for meals. You have lunch in the state or in Brazil, and so we would have lunch with different families every single day. So it's kind of like a siesta. Everyone takes 2 hours and they go and have lunch. So you go and eat rice and beans and meat every single day, and everyone will always say come mais, which means eat more. So then you just keep eating more, and you have to be pretty like, no, I don't want any more. No, I'm really okay, but it was so good to get them to not feed you anymore. They don't want you to do their dishes. They want to just serve you and be hospitable to you. So my companion would always have me distract them so that she could try and do the dishes, but they usually stop you. They don't let you go any further. Transportation in Brazil is kind of crazy. So you just walk across the street, you run across the road, you hope you don't get hit because people don't really stop. They just go really fast. When we were knocking doors, we would clap outside. You don't like knock on the door or ring the doorbell, you just clap really loudly outside. Something that is just funny for Americans who are learning Portuguese is you go there and you'll say, posso ter copo de água, which means can I have a cup of water? But for some reason in Brazilian culture, saying posso ter is rude and you're not supposed to do that. And so you have to learn to say, me dá copo de água? Will you give me a cup of water? So that was something that a lot of American missionaries got made fun of because they were always saying that incorrectly. Something else that's kind of funny is Americans often say sorry. And so in Portuguese, because I was so used to just saying, sorry that happened to you. Oh, sorry, that's so hard. I would say desculpa, which means sorry. Well, Brazilians don't say sorry that happened. It doesn't make sense to them. And so they would often tease me about saying sorry because it didn't make any sense to them. So Brazil originally was full of indigenous tribes. It's like Native Americans lived there. Eventually, Europeans, mainly people from Portugal, came to Brazil and settled the land, and they started to build cities. This was a couple 300, 400, 500 years ago, but they started to intermix with the indigenous tribes that were there. And then because Portugal had started to migrate to Brazil, they also imported slaves from Africa. So then all of a sudden you had African people who were being used as slaves. So then they started to intermix. Well, because Portuguese people from Portugal had started to live in Brazil, other Europeans started to move there. So you can see a lot of people from Italy, a lot of people from Germany. When my grandpa served his mission, he served in the southern half of Brazil, and it was only 2 missions at the time, and this was back in the 1950s. He actually spoke German on his mission because there were whole colonies where people only spoke German. So that was only 60, 70 years ago. And there are still places where they celebrate holidays from Germany or Italy, or Holland even, which is kind of unique. And then really interestingly, in the last 30 or 40 years, Brazil and Japan started to have immigration to each other's countries. And so a lot of colonies were Japanese. And so my mission president, President Kuseki is actually a Japanese name. So Brazil is a really neat place because there's such a unique, diverse group of people who have intermixed and who now live there. And so this culture, while Latin American in some ways, European in some ways, African, Japanese, and indigenous as well, it all sort of becomes this big melting pot, which was really neat to be a part of.
I ate a lot of estrogonofe de frango, which is like chicken stroganoff. How to explain it? It's like it's just chicken with like red tomato sauce and cream mixed together, and then they serve it on rice and put like little, it's almost like potato chips on top that are really thin, that they call batatas fritas. But it's just really delicious, and it's one of their signature dishes. Their meat is really good. Their churrascos, it's amazing, way better than barbecue. And then they have feijoada, which I'm not sure if you've heard of, but it's like black beans and all different parts of a pig, so a lot of pork. And in the MTC, I didn't really like it as much because they used a lot of parts of the pig that weren't really pleasing, like pig's foot and just fattier parts of the pig. But I realized that like Sao Paulo is pretty Americanized, and they kind of like to change the old history or historical culture of Sao Paulo. So they use like more sausage in their feijoada, which is really good with the black beans, and then it's served on rice. But it's mainly, those are two of my favorite dishes actually. I love how warm and friendly the people are. At first they're a little hesitant to open up just because they don't really know who you are, especially as missionaries walking around. We kind of stand out, and so they're kind of iffy about letting us in. But once we break that barrier and we compliment them, then they're super open and friendly and warm, and I really miss just like how often they give hugs. That's something that was a struggle for me coming home, just because just all of the sisters would give you a hug, all the women. Of course, sisters wouldn't hug any men, but it's normally a hug and a kiss is the culture, and that's something that I really miss. I think we're just kind of more of like, in America, a handshake society, so it's a little distant that way, and that's something that I miss.
Brazilians are very blunt, so be prepared for that. If they think that you're fat, they'll tell you. If they think you're too skinny, they'll tell you. If they don't like your hair, they'll tell you. Like, they'll just tell you how it is. In the beginning of my mission, like, that was a shock to me. I was just like, that is not okay. Like, that's not how we roll. And I learned to appreciate it more towards the end of my mission, because it's not like they're being mean. Like, it's just how they use it to describe people, or like, it's just what they think of you. It doesn't mean that they don't love you or don't care about you. Like, they used to tell me I was fat all the time when I got to my mission, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, the skinniest person in my family besides my sister. And they're like, yeah, no, sister, you're fat. Like, you should lose some weight. But like, they still love me to death, and it wasn't a bad thing. And so it was really fun to go back and visit them after I'd lost weight at the end of my mission. Be like, boom, showed you. But I don't really know what it showed them, but I was just like, here, I did it. Are you happy now? And they still loved me just as much as they did when they thought I was fat. But your mission president, if they're Brazilian, will probably be very blunt. And I remember I love my mission president so much. Like, they care a lot about you, but it was their final interview, and she was going through the picture album of just like all the missionaries that they had. She's like, I remember everybody's names, and so she was proving it to us. And I remember, like, she came to my picture, and I was like, oh, that's a horrible picture, sister. Like, throw it away. Like, I don't, like, take a different picture with me. Like, I want a different one. And she's like, yeah, I almost threw it away. And I was like, oh, I was only kidding. Ouch. That, like, kind of hurt. And she's like, yeah, but then I decided to keep it to prove to people that my mission makes people beautiful. And I was like, ouch. And I was like, so were you telling me I was ugly when I got here? And she was like, yeah. And so, like, she was just super blunt and how it was. Like, looking back, like, there were a lot of changes I made. Like, I was definitely a lot prettier at the end of my mission when I left. But I really appreciate it because they're real. Like, they tell it how it is. And, like, they don't let that interfere with how much they love you. But, like, every single person I met on the street pretty much, like, had some commentary about something we were wearing or what we were doing with our hair, or if they thought we needed to gain weight. So it took a while to get used to, but be prepared for that, because sometimes they may seem a little harsh, but they still love you.
I would urge the non-Brazilian missionaries going to Brazil to accept the culture and don't look at America as better than Brazil or try to compare the two, because it's comparing apples to oranges. You know, and the Americans think the Wright brothers invented the airplane, and the Brazilians think that, you know, a Brazilian invented the airplane, and we're always fighting about who really invented the airplane. And so I would just encourage you to embrace Brazil as it is and don't compare.
There's definitely a lot to be said for acting like a Brazilian and treating other people the way a Brazilian would treat other people. There's lots of social customs, like if you say no to someone, like, Brazilians just lie. And it's socially acceptable, and everyone knows you're lying, and it's not like shameful. It's just like that's what you do. Like, hey, you want to go to church with us? Oh, maybe, you know, if it's not raining, I'll go. That means no, but they're saying if it's not raining, I'll go, to be polite. So they're lying to be polite, and you know they're lying, but it's just the way the culture is, you know. And so, yeah, Brazilians are a lot less direct about things, and that's probably one of the hardest things to get, is that they're very indirect if they're bearing bad news, right? But you know, by the same token, that can be a difficulty in the companionship, because if you want to talk directly with a companion about an issue, you know, he may not want to. He may just want to, you know, shove it under the rug, or he may want you to understand what he's thinking already, and just kind of, you know, read his mind. And that was my experience with one of my companions, one or two of my companions for sure. Once they would, you know, be offended at something I had done, I did not realize it was offensive, and then they wouldn't talk to me for like the entire day, you know. And that might be an extreme example, but it's important to understand. It's not something that I know how to explain or to convey, really. But it's important to understand that Brazilians interpret what we do in a very different way than how we mean it, and vice versa. You know, a Brazilian might say, "I'll go to church if it's not raining," and then you interpret, "Okay, well, you know, I'm going to call him and see if he wants to go to church." When in reality, he already told you no, and you're just going to bother him. And so it's things like that. It just takes a while to understand it. But I would recommend, you know, any incoming mission like, well, you know, what do I do then? Be careful and just be observant about, you know, how Brazilians act, and then maybe ask your companion, you know, I'm new to this culture and I don't understand a lot of the customs, so, you know, help me out and help me understand, you know, what I'm doing. And if I do something that seems offensive, then let me know, because, you know, you might think it's obvious and that I'm being a jerk, but it's actually because I don't understand. And I'm not, you know, I'm trying to be nice, and I don't know how to be nice, maybe in Brazil. And it's a funny concept. It's like, how could you not know how to be polite, you know? But it is. It's like, politeness is a cultural concept. There's parts that are universal, there's parts that are totally cultural. Yeah, you kind of have to learn that. So that's probably an important thing to remember.
I think to come to terms with people that you meet in Brazil, it's helpful to know the culture there. I felt a little bit estranged when people asked me For instance, what do you know about Brazil? I could tell them, well, very few things. Very seldom had I heard anybody talk about Brazil, and I think they're fascinated when someone comes along that does know something. Another thing is to remember that the people there are special, and the culture that they share is unique to them, and it's something that is very important to the way they are and the way that they should be taught as well. As a missionary, we try to help people to come unto Christ, and oftentimes they have their own way of doing that. For instance, family is very important in Brazil. They are very respectful to God, and He is overall. Very seldom would you come across someone that did not believe in God, and that connection already brings a warm spirit into your relationship when you acknowledge that. So pre-mission, I would say learn to respect the people and appreciate their culture as much as you can.
I served in a tourist town called São Lourenço in the south of my mission, and this is kind of where I had my first taste of the kind of the Brazilian culture with holidays, with respect to holidays. They had a lot of Catholic holidays that they celebrate. One was very cool in this tourist town. They took painted chalk and they spread it up and down the streets in like the most beautiful designs. So they would use it's got to be a ton of chalk, but they would do these pictures of Christ out of this colored chalk on the roads. And we're talking, it was 20 feet wide, and they would run the length of a whole road, and they would be these scenes of maybe Christ's life, or because they were Catholic holidays, a lot of crosses and things like that. But that was one of the coolest experience I've had with their culture, with regards to holidays. Now, as far as their culture goes, outside of that, it's very focused on soccer, right? I'm sure everybody's heard that. It's focused on soccer, and it was a big deal to them. Sundays is when they played soccer games the most. So usually between 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 6 to 8 o'clock at night on Sundays, couldn't find a soul on the streets because they were all inside watching soccer, and that really is their passion. As you're walking down the streets, you'll see kids playing soccer. We often played with them and then invited their parents to come out. We teach them a lesson or invite their parents to come to church with us. Soccer was a way that really, it's huge down there. They eat, sleep, and breathe it. One experience that we had was teaching some youth that loved soccer, and every P day we get a chance to go play with them, play soccer, and you could just tell that. It was just so they were so passionate about it. They all had their soccer uniforms from their teams. They all had their team that they cheered for. And it wasn't just them. It was really everybody down there. It was a huge part of their culture. Other parts of their culture or traditions that I saw was some of how the people interact. They're very friendly. By nature, they're very kind. Anybody will have a conversation with you just about any time of the day. You can be walking down the street and you can ask somebody, what they believe or something like that, and they'll have an honest conversation with you. And that really is probably another reason that contributes to the incredible missionary work down there. Is they're open-hearted, they're willing to serve, they're willing to talk. Most people will talk to you, and when I first got down there, this was a shock for me. Is they're close talkers. They'll be a couple inches from your face, and they'll be in a very intense conversation with you. And if you're not expecting it, you're kind of like, whoa. You're in my face. Like, they're very close. But that's just part of how they are. They're just passionate about what they believe, what they know, and that was one of the things that I noticed when I first got down there, especially. Part of etiquette goes, as far as etiquette goes, that people they want you to love their food because they sacrifice a lot for it. A lot of the people down there come from a very difficult financial situation. There's not a whole lot of job opportunities down there that pay very well. especially if you don't have secondary education. And so a lot of them just graduate high school and then they try to find a job, and so they really sacrifice a lot to prepare meals for the missionaries. So they would love it when we would rave about their food, and we would, because it was always very delicious. And so one thing that we notice is complimenting them throughout the meal, telling them that you love their food, that this is so good, that you're grateful for it, that you probably couldn't do what we're going to do today without this sister preparing you a meal. And that was very good. I mean, it was just a really cool experience to be able to thank them for it, and they appreciated it. Other than that, they're very laid back. There's not a whole lot of etiquette that's required beyond the normal etiquette that you should normally use.
I'd have to say that the south part of Brazil in general is very Americanized or Europeanized in its kind of culture and everything. You'll have companions from the Northeast, and so you'll hear about it, or from the North. And you'll hear about some of the foods that they ate when they were at home, and some of the foods that they'll tell you to try. All I have to say is that some of them sound not appetizing to me. Maybe they will to you. I don't know. You'll just see. But a basic plate in the southern part of Brazil, it's rice and beans, and the beans aren't anything like super fancy. It's, just like a bean stew, sort of. Sometimes I'll have bacon in it, sometimes I'll have some sausage, stuff like that. Onions, just your basic stuff. So there'll be beans and rice, and then usually there'll be a salad. And the salads that they make I think are very good. They don't have ranch dressing, but the dressings that they do, they actually make that has a lot of lime, has a lot of olive oil, sometimes vinegar. It turns out pretty well. And then also they usually have some sort of meat. It'll be a lot of chicken. You'll see a lot of chicken, but occasionally it'll be beef or something like that. Rarely will you see fish in the Londrina mission. Now, if you were more towards the coast, you'd probably see more of it, but since we're so far inland, the fish gets pretty expensive. So only in the wealthier members' home will you see fish, probably. As for culture, first thing that took time to get used to is that they always eat with both of their hands at the same time. So like they have a fork and a knife in their hands at all times. So I don't know how you eat, but usually when I ate at home before the mission, I would just use the knife when I needed to, and then put it down, and then I would just eat with one hand. Maybe grab the knife and use it again, put it down, and then eat with one hand. In Brazil, it's always together, always in the same hand. It's not a necessity, it's just something I found cool, and I decided to adopt. Some other things in their culture. Oh, the whole kissing on the cheek thing. You can't do that as a missionary, so you're going to have to be careful. I almost got kissed on the cheek 2 times by 2 girls. One was actually less active, and so I guess she must have forgot that missionaries don't do that. And then the other one was somebody was a friend of a member, and the member was just introducing us. And the first time I went into panic mode, and I didn't know what to do. And so I kind of froze. Luckily, the member stopped her. But the second time I was more prepared, and so I was like, wait, no, can't do that. You'll see that it's very similar with the American culture. There are some little twists and turns in there, but you'll just go about learning them. And what's really cool is that you'll see how the culture influences the language.
I know in Brazil, especially northeastern Brazil, religion is very important to them. Catholicism is the most dominant religion, but there's a lot of evangelical religions that are also, it's really quite plentiful. It's almost like there's a lot of churches there. Like every street has a church. And a lot of it is treated like a business. Pastors are usually pretty well paid, and they'll try to enlist a lot of their preachings is a lot like, a sales technique. And so you'll hear a lot of weird stories about what goes on in some of the churches there, so you'll be happy to take people out of those. I don't know if that's what you want in the interview, but so it's definitely religion is very dominant. Christ is very important to everyone in northeastern Brazil. So that's something that's really great. It's really easy to talk to people about Christ. Let's think. Casting out demons is really popular amongst religious people there. Even though someone's completely fine, they'll try to cast out demons out of them. They might try to do that to you too, sometime point on your mission. So that's always interesting. Oh no, I've seen it being done. Yeah, so it definitely happens a lot.
It is a dangerous part of Brazil, so I got assaulted 3 times on my mission. Most of the time I didn't have anything for them to take, but one time they took some money of mine, and my house got robbed 3 times as well. That's above average, but usually every missionary will get robbed at some point in their mission. But there's never been any cases of like violent action against missionaries. It's just threatenings and stuff like that, so that'll be fine. Interesting, you'll be grateful for the security we have here once you get back. Well, the people there are very friendly. So one point in my mission, I was serving in an area where the church wasn't there yet. It's the first missionary in the area. And you'd go to random people's houses, and here in the U.S., people usually turn you away, but there they would invite you in and feed you lunch or feed you whatever they're eating at the time. They're just very, very, very friendly people. There was one area in my mission that was really unique. It's called Juazeiro do Norte, and it was actually founded by a Catholic priest that was then excommunicated from the Catholic Church for what they thought was heresy. And actually the 3rd largest human statue in the world is located in that city. The first being the Statue of Liberty, the second being Cristo Redentor in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and the 3rd being a statue of this Catholic priest. And it's basically the mecca of Catholicism in northeastern Brazil. So you'll have people from all around the world, or all around Brazil, go to that place. And so the population of the city is about 250,000, but during those weeks when there's a lot of people there, which happens every quarter or every month or so, there's a lot of different things, the population of the city will usually double, and then usually results in you not having water to take showers. But it was a really interesting place to serve, really, really interesting. I compare it to the BYU. As BYU is to Mormons, so is that city to Catholicism. So it was an interesting place to serve, and actually the people there were super great. So it was really nice to serve there.
The people in Rio Grande do Sul come from a rich heritage of the gauchos, I guess you'd say, which are the cowboys. You have a lot of these in like Argentina and Uruguay also. So the culture is like, I guess, like a South American version of Texas in a way. In a lot of the smaller cities, a lot of the people I saw were just dressed like gauchos, like kind of cowboys. That's what they did for their jobs. They worked in the fields with horses and cows and whatnot. And so a lot of people will be dressed like that. And you can look up it on Google, see what they look like. There's some funny things about the culture in Rio Grande do Sul, in that state. Whenever you're leaving someone's house, they will always get the door for you. You never get the door for yourself. And so I even do that today sometimes, because I'm like used to people not getting the door for me or like and whatnot. So, or I'll get the door for people when they're leaving, just because I'm still kind of used to that. People in Rio Grande do Sul are generally pretty laid back. A lot of people's day kind of revolves around drinking mate or chimarrão, which is an herb that it's kind of like tea. They have these cups, these wooden cups made out of like gourds, and they'll fill it on one side with this herb that comes from a tree, the erva mate tree, and then they'll fill it up with hot water and they'll drink it out of this metal straw. And it's kind of a cool cultural thing, because people will drink it like every day. Like they'll have a time every morning when they'll just go in front of their house, like sit down on their chair, and they'll just drink it and like sit there in front of their house, just drinking it up. And it's cool because in the evenings, families will gather around, and so everybody has like beach chairs there that they keep in their house, and you could bring them outside and unfold them and sit down on them. And so in the evenings, especially in the summer, people will bring out their chairs as a family and kind of just sit down, and they'll be drinking the chimarrão, the mate, and just passing around. You'll drink a cup, you'll fill it back up, and you'll pass it on to the next person. And they just kind of sit around and chat. And that's kind of a really cool cultural thing, I think. And it's a good opportunity as missionaries to stop by and say, hey, can we share a quick message with you guys about the gospel? And people are usually pretty laid back and open to hearing a little bit about the gospel. So as far as values, I think what people value most people would constantly, when we'd be having prayers with people would be constantly thanking the Lord for their health. And they would thank the Lord for their families. I think one of the things that stuck out to me about their culture is a lot of people had very little, but what little they had, they were very willing to share. And that was, I think, something that I definitely learned from the people there. The importance of just sharing and being free with our substance, I guess. I guess one thing I learned is that it's a lot more important to have friends than things. And so when you share your things, you're going to have more friends, And I think that's something that the people in Brazil understand pretty well generally.
Yeah, the people are what made me fall in love with Brazil. The culture is just so open and loving, and it's like, I don't know, there's just this different feel that they're really family oriented, and it's so different from here. People are a lot louder and they have a lot more energy, I would say, than Americans do as well. A lot of the time, the way the structure and like the buildings and stuff were, they didn't have glass windows. There were lots of walls and different things that were up. But they kind of have a culture of sharing, like basically what's yours is mine kind of a thing. And you kind of get that with the different elders too. The Brazilian elders were very much like, they would eat everyone's food, or like they'd always be like, oh yeah, go ahead and eat my food. So that was something to get used to, because it's so much different. Us as Americans, like, we're used to being like, oh, I bought this and this is mine and I keep it. So but it was so cool. The culture was also very Catholic, I would say, in general. And the hardest part probably just with the culture was maybe getting them to commit. Because they were always really friendly and they never wanted to disappoint you. And so like you invite them to do something like, oh yeah, definitely, like I want to be there, like I'm going to come to church and I'll read and do all these things. And then you have to go and follow up with them. And they're like, oh yeah, I said I was going to do that, huh? Like, yeah, I'm going to do that though. I'm still going to do that, but you kind of have to keep up with them, because they never wanted to disappoint you. But so like they'd always tell you that they wanted to do something, but you kind of have to help them along. But also just with going to church and different things, there are lots of phrases that they say, like, si Deus quiser, like, oh, if God wants me to, I'll go. And and it's basically just kind of like an excuse to like not go, because a lot of the time we're just like, well, God wants you to go, or like, why wouldn't God want you to go? Like, what do you think God would put in your way of going to church? Or they'd say, se não tiver chovendo, if it's not raining. If it's not raining, I'll go. So that they had these typical excuses that they'd say. I thought it was really funny. Very cultural. They had their go-to excuses. They always loved feeding people. Even just going door to door, someone would be like, oh, hey, we're making this, would you want some? Or like, hey, we just made some juice, like, you want some? The food was so good. I loved it, because it seemed like, it was all homemade. People wouldn't eat out like we do here, except for maybe in the richer areas they had a McDonald's. But usually it was like the really rich people that would go there, because McDonald's was way more expensive. But just your basic family, like the mom would always make, it was always rice and beans was at every meal. Usually there'd be chicken and, their salad. But their salad was usually just tomatoes, not really lettuce. But it was so good, because every mom or every home kind of had a different twist on the way that they would make the rice and the beans. So it never tasted exactly the same. And so I liked that part too. Because in the MTC, it was rice and beans, but it was the same rice and beans every single day. You get tired of it. But out there on the mission, and then you get something different every single time. And I definitely had my favorites. Like, you go to a certain house, you're like, yes, today we get to go and eat lunch with this family or whatever. Oh yeah, that's also a different thing about the culture. The big meal of the day was lunch. It wasn't dinner. So like we'd have our big lunch, and then like just when we were out tractioning or whatever, then we'd just grab dinner ourselves like really quick, or we'd have like a snack in our bag or something. Yeah, so eating habits were definitely a lot different.
One thing for certain is that Brazilians are really friendly people. They're really nice and relaxed. I don't really remember too many that were overly mean, but most people were really friendly. If it's those people that I've met who were from Brazil, like my mission companions or just people we would speak to, they would, when they invited us in, they were usually really friendly. They'd offer like some sort of snack or something. It's like or at least a cup of water. When people were kind of hesitant to let us into their homes, like some missionaries would get kind of angry, like they're obviously inside, but I think it's less about them not wanting to hear our message, not all the time at least, but people down there are very religious, and they actually have a bit of a respect for figures that they can see as spiritual leaders. And not everyone can see, like not everyone knows about missionaries, like what they do, so that can be kind of intimidating. But I've heard this an interesting way of looking at it. They're not rejecting us because they don't want to hear our message, but they're rejecting us because they're not interested in hearing it, but they don't want to just come up and tell you go away, because they don't want to be disrespectful of you. That was one way of looking at it. But people down there, people in Brazil, they're pretty God-fearing people, as far as well as they can do it, at least. Like I said, they have a lot of churches down there, and they do that. Like most people like to go to the Pentecostal churches, and there were a lot of Catholics too. My area I didn't see a whole lot of Catholics. I wasn't quite sure why. But we also had a lot of people who were part of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and there's the Seventh-day Adventists. That's actually the first. It was in the mission field I actually learned about the Seventh-day Adventists in the first time. I thought it was a Brazilian church, and wow, yeah, I finally got to learn something new. Well, they do have Catholic holidays, which if I recall right, they actually it's like a national thing where they'll have it's celebrated by everyone. Usually. I also remember that their schedule for meal times is actually way different, because they actually have their biggest meal at lunch, and dinner's kind of our big meal here. And that actually kind of appeals a little better, because they eat a large meal during the middle of the day, and that's basically when they're able to get together. Besides some of the more known holidays like Carnival, which I guess it's like a national thing, but I can't yes, sorry. There is the Brazil's Independence Day. That was a pretty big thing in my mission too. We'd have people that would go to Vitória actually to celebrate. And missionaries actually got to, for once, be part of a parade they have there, which was pretty cool. Doing this means I don't care, but how you do it can show you just like how serious it means. If you do it really slow and like deliberately, it's just kind of offensive. Just like, I absolutely do not care what you say. But if you just like, if you do it like just casually while you're saying I don't really, like it doesn't matter, it's a little not too bad. Also, the okay sign we do, apparently that you don't want to do that in Brazil. That's an offensive sign. I remember going to basically it was like a monastery on the hill nearby Vitória. Actually, it's like right across the river. Vitória, it's like the whole state. It's basically like an island, which is connected by the bridges. And on one side, there's a monastery, a Catholic monastery, and it has a pretty interesting story about this man. I believe is a saint, and it's been so long. People would go there, like the Catholics would go there to pray, and then they would light candles there. It was pretty interesting, actually. And the view up there was great. They have a huge mass inside, which I didn't really get to go to, but if you click the climb around the mountain, we saw monkeys too. That was kind of different.
I love the Brazilian culture. It's very diverse. It's very much kind of like the way that when we think about American culture, we don't really think about one thing in particular. And the Brazilian culture is kind of the same way. It's very diverse. There's a lot of people from different backgrounds. In general, they're very happy. They're very conversational. They'll open. They'll talk with you, and they're very direct. Like I had companions that, like, you know what, they're not afraid to go out and ask a girl on a date. You know, like these things that we talk about in our culture. Like they're very like, and I think it probably varies based on the personality of the person. But as a culture, it's very out there. It's very vibrant, and they're very loving. Like they understand these ideas of a family. And accepting other people. Like if you are, and I think this is true for most of Latin America, if you are open, you're interested to know about them and to listen, then they will accept you with open arms. It doesn't matter where you come from or what your background is. They're very accepting.
São Paulo is busy. It is the third largest city on earth, and it is the most diverse city on earth. So you will meet so many interesting people. People say sometimes that race ceases to exist in your mind because everyone you meet is there's no single race that dominates in São Paulo. It is all strung together. So it's like the world in one really tiny area. It is super busy all the time. It's always congested. The busing situation is crazy, and the train situation is crazy. There's so many people all the time, but it's fun. You're just always surrounded by people. São Paulo, it's kind of interesting where wealth is just kind of strung in with poverty, and so you can take a bus and you'll go through a really rich area, and then you'll go through a destitute poverty. The city is laid out. There's something that are called favelas, which is where a lot of the lower income people live, and these are just these massive neighborhoods that are built with really cheap materials, and they'll just build house upon house upon house upon house, almost if it was like Legos. And you can go to a gate and you'll knock, well, you'll clap because they don't have doors, and they have gates, and you'll clap and they'll let you into this little house, and there are actually 4 or 5 houses in there, and so you'll enter what you think was one house, but there are actually 5 families that live there, and so that's how you can meet a ton of people. You'll walk a lot. Busing is actually kind of expensive, and so missionaries are usually on their feet. You get pretty good at walking. The climate, Brazil is really hot. São Paulo is better. It's more moderate. It's towards the south and it's by the coast, so it's more moderate. But in the summer, it will get up to 100 degrees with a lot of humidity, and you will just be really hot all the time. In the winter, it does get cold. Bring a sweater, bring 2 sweaters and maybe a jacket, because the houses don't have insulation, and so the temperature that is outside, a lot of times it's the temperature inside, and so you're gonna want to keep yourself warm. It rains a lot, and missionaries take rain. We work in the rain. We don't stop for that. So bring an umbrella. Well, you can probably buy an umbrella. You'll end up buying a lot of umbrellas. Bring a good raincoat. Make sure you have good socks. Socks are important because Brazil doesn't have really good socks, and if those get wet, it's really bad. So the climate in the summer, it does this thing where in the morning it's really, really hot. It's 9 a.m. and it's already like 89 degrees. And then in the afternoon, it's just this pouring rain. Just this pouring rain season. And then towards the evening, it gets actually really nice. And then in the winter, it's just it's got this cold, humid breeze that comes through. So that's why you're going to want to have your sweater. But it's always good working environment. The climate is good because there are never situations where you can't go work outside. I mean, it's a tropical climate. It's a paradise. Well, the missionaries can tell you about the dogs. There are a ton of wild dogs. There's no animal control, so you can run into a lot of stray dogs in the street. The dogs are really apt to city life, and so they know how to get around. So you'll always see them, but if you don't bother them, they don't bother you. People in Sao Paulo work all the time because it's just they don't have a lot of opportunities and they take whatever jobs they can get. And everyone's trying to better their opportunities, so they'll go work during the day, they'll study at night, and they'll go to work early in the morning after that. It's not uncommon for people to have 2 jobs and go to school. It's a really hard situation. A lot of people work and jobs that in the United States aren't as typical. A lot of people are bus drivers because Sao Paulo has so many people. You need a lot of buses. So you have a lot of what they call motoristas. You have a lot of people who work in restaurants. You have a lot of people that clean houses. You have a lot of people who work as taxi drivers. You have a lot of government employees. Then you have, Sao Paulo is actually one of the richest, I think it is the richest city in Brazil, and so you have a lot of people that are really wealthy as well who work for a lot of major international corporations that are based out of Sao Paulo. And so it's hard to say what is a really typical job in Sao Paulo because it depends on the demographic. You'll work with the rich of the rich and the poor of the poor. What's also funny in Brazil is that anywhere you go, there will be like a little cafe, like a little place where you can stop and get a snack, because everyone will just cook and sell it on the street, and that's really bad for missionaries because you can gain a lot of weight really fast because it's relatively cheap and it's really good because Brazilian food is a lot better than American food. Maybe I'm biased, but it's really good, and so a lot of people do that. They'll be cooks. A lot of your ward members, the irmãs who will feed you, they're like professionals, and so your lunches are really high grade. And that's the other thing, in Brazil you don't have dinner, you have lunch with the members, and they will feed you until you physically cannot eat anymore. And so be prepared for that. They'll treat you really, really well. All major businesses that we know have a foothold in Sao Paulo as well. I'm trying to remember if there's any giant ones off the top of my head. I mean, a lot of big banks that are Brazilian, Bradesco or Banco do Brasil. There are some that in the United States aren't that big of a deal, like Tang, but in Brazil there are a ton of Tang flavors and they're really good, and they're a huge part of the culture because Brazilians love juice. So anytime you have a meal, you're gonna have juice with it. So that's a big deal. Sao Paulo is a great place for tourism. There's a lot of history, a lot of culture. Sao Paulo is one of the older cities. And so you can go to, they have this place that's kind of like Central Park. It's called Ibirapuera. And in Ibirapuera, I think it was voted the best park in the world, where you can just go into this huge Central Park thing. There are a ton of basketball courts, and you can rent bikes and skateboards and rollerblades. There's fountains, there's monuments. You can just go and relax, and it's really therapeutic for the missionaries. It's a great place to visit. Every missionary should get a chance to go there. There is a place called Avenida Paulista, which is like Times Square for Sao Paulo, where all the major industries and companies have their their buildings, just tons of skyscrapers along this avenue. It's called Avenida Paulista. And you can go there, a lot of missionaries have to go there for their doctor's appointments and stuff, but you can go there for tourism. It's really cool. That's where they have some of the American stuff, so they run into like some McDonald's and some Burger Kings and Starbucks. Not that the missionaries would go there very often, but you know. It's a tourist attraction, so that's worth going to. Another place is called 25 de Março, which is like, we don't want to say black market, but it's where Brazil sells a lot of its cheaper goods, some knockoff brands. And you can go there, and the missionaries like to go there because you can get a lot of stuff for really cheap. And it's not good quality, but it's fun to go there and shop for the experience, because it's just unbelievable how big this shopping place is. Brazil does everything larger than life. They haven't quite figured out the happy medium. When they want to do something cool, it has to be enormous, and so that's kind of how it is. Another really cool thing about Brazil are the feiras, where it's like a farmer's market, but it happens every week, and it's anywhere you go, there'll be a feira, and you can just go, and they have every kind of fruit that you can imagine, and you go there and you talk to the guy about the price, and you know, you're not going to barter with them because they have their prices set, but they'll cut the missionaries' deals a lot of the time. And you can go there and get fresh fruit, and it's great. It's a good way to keep your health up because missionaries need to eat well. And that's a cultural thing, because it's not like the United States where you go and buy your food in silence. Everyone's yelling, everyone's like, buy this, try this, it's really good, here's a great deal, hey, I'll cut you a deal. And you know, it's a really human interaction. It's really nice. And then there are a lot of museums. The soccer museum is really cool. A lot of art museums, history of Brazil museums. It's a really cultural place, so there are a lot of places you can see.
We have arrived at probably one of my favorite subjects, talking about the culture. I love Brazilian culture, and I especially love the northeastern culture. It's incredible. They are so loving. You just need to be prepared if you're going for 18 months, 2 years, you know, be prepared to just be loved. You know, your entire mission. They love you a lot. Yes, there's people that might not like you so much, you know, maybe from those, you know, those denominations that we talked about. You know, some people may be opposed to, you know, your beliefs, but wow, such a loving people. You know, sometimes we'd be lost and we'd ask someone for directions. This is incredible. Yeah, I remember a specific experience. I was with one of my companions, Elder Hikart, and we asked someone, and this would happen many times, but I remember this specific reason or this specific experience. So yeah, we just asked someone on the street to help us find this address. Or no, not even that. We just said, hey, do you know where this house number is? Because that's one thing to also notice that I didn't mention about the mission, is that the house numbers are, even in the city, they're very confusing. So you'll be asking around because, you know, they're not in numerical order, because they kind of just like, we'll build a house and then build another house with a completely different number, and then another house with just a number that's not in, you know, sequential order. So yeah, we were asking because we were confused about a house number. Hey, have you seen this house number on this street? And this guy was like, no, I didn't see it, but I'll help you find it. So he walked with us for like 10 minutes, just stopped whatever he was doing and helped us find that house. And it's just so incredible. They're just so helpful and super friendly in all aspects. Yeah, so wonderful. I love Pernambucanos. They are awesome. But yeah, so yeah, they're very helpful in those aspects. I guess if you want water, you know, you can just go, instead of knocking on doors, right? You'll be clapping on doors, right? So as you go and clap on some of those doors, and you ask someone for a cup of water, you can definitely use that opportunity to get a cup of water and, you know, give them the water that never ends of the gospel, right? So you can do that. It's great. So they have a culture, I guess, not speaking in a negative way, but it's, I guess, comparable to, I guess, the German culture in terms of drinking. Lots of people will drink openly in the streets. So that's fun, right? You know? But you will definitely have some crazy experiences during the holidays. You know, it's just such a very thriving, I'm not sure the adjective, just a very ecstatic atmosphere where everyone's just going crazy, you know, having fun and whatnot, spending time with family. So yes, one of those holidays though, you will probably be staying indoors, is Carnival. Carnival, I guess, translated. That's in February. So be aware, you'll probably be staying indoors, you know, while I was serving, we stayed inside from about 5 to the rest of the night. We go to our house at 5, our apartment at 5. Speaking more about the culture of your mission, the people they'll talk about, you know, the government a lot. They'll probably bring up that subject a lot. That's something that came up quite a bit. People talking about, you know, our government. Kind of, you know, of course, being a missionary, you kind of have to avoid those subjects, but they're very concerned about, you know, corruption in Brazil, and so they'll talk about that quite a bit, and they have a very neat history. You know how the Northeast was established. I actually baptized. He was an old soldier, and he would tell me all about. I'm sure one of you will meet him or hear about this man. He's very. He finds his way with the missionaries. His name's Panta. And so Panta, he's like this old soldier. He'd talk about the history of Brazil, and it's very comparable even to our U.S. history in a way, you know, just kind of getting its independence from Portugal. You know, there's some really neat videos that I've seen since I've gotten home about, you know, how Brazil gained its independence. And so you'll notice that the people, you know, it's a free country. And people, they like to preserve their rights as well. You know, we have that saying by Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. There's someone else, I don't know who, he might have been from the Northeast, I don't know what part of Brazil, but in their independence, he said basically the same thing. And so you'll see a lot of similarities there with our culture and their culture as far as it goes. So it's amazing. You know, they're free people. They love their rights and they want to protect them for sure. And so, yeah, you'll see that a lot.